Alright, so in this video we will talk about how can we use the analogy of a building activity to help us understand what is a software architecture. Okay, so the discipline of architecture, that is the design, the construction of buildings, offers a rich base of concept to help us understand software architecture and more generally software engineering, the whole process of software engineering. So this analogy between the design and the construction of buildings and the design and construction of software is very strong. So since we all have a substantial experience in living and around buildings and probably seeing the and hear a little bit about the process, how this construction workers they build those buildings. So in a highly simplified concept of architecture, I mean the building architecture, so requirements for a building are collected. A design is created to satisfy those requirements. The design is refined to yield elaborate blueprints. A construction is based on the blueprints, and the result structure is then occupied and used. Yeah. So when we doing the construction, when we need first have requirements. What kind of building do we want to have? Is it a house for living, or is it a building for some military purpose? Those have our different standard and requirements. Yeah. So in the software architecture, requirements are specified, right? What kind of functionalities do we want to have? A high-level design is created. Detailed algorithms are developed based upon the design. Code is written to implement the algorithms. And finally, the system is deployed and used. So basically, they have pretty similar steps between the software architecture and the building architecture. And if we dig more, we can see some insights that reveals that the building activity help us to review the software architecture activities. Some concepts. So first, perhaps the foremost is the very concept of building heaven architecture. Well, the architecture is a concept, but separate from, but linked to the physical structure itself. A second insight is that properties of structures are induced by the design of their architectures. For instance, a castle with a high, thick walls and narrow window is designed that way so that it has excellent defensive properties. Okay, so the properties of that structure is needs to be implemented, and when we take that into consideration, during the initial design stage, this has to be taken into consideration. Otherwise, you cannot just build a wood house. However, at the halfway, you say, yeah, I'm actually going to build some military building that help us to defend the enemies. So that's maybe may not be a good process. Yeah, so the properties is reflected in the design. So does the software. The software also, when you design a software for game, or it's a software for, say, a military, they have totally different quality required, right? You just in in the game, actually it's easier to hack because they just do not have those standard, those properties being considered in the design stage. However, in the military software, probably you need to very carefully specify every single point of the functionality so that it's not vulnerable. Yeah. Third insight is the recognition of the distinctive rule and character of an architect. So the architect is responsible for the creation of the architecture. So the architect has to be the person that has the knowledge to cross the disciplines. Not only he has to have the knowledge not only in the engineering, however, for example, he has also to have the knowledge in the requirements or the application domain, like where this building or where this software needs to be applied. For example, a software for the banking, he has to have some financial knowledge, right? Knowledge of finance. So a fourth insight is that a process is not important as architecture. This is not to say that process is unimportant. On the contrary, for both building architecture and software architecture, the architects and the construction companies clearly followed and depend on the standard process to guide their daily activities and ensure the qualities of the design and the building or implementation. But the architects and engineers responsible for the structure must keep its design qualities at the forefront. Process is a thing that is present to serve those ends, to serve the architecture, not to be an end itself, right? You can't have a whole bunch of a company that follows and process perfectly. However, if you have a horribly designed architecture, this is still gonna be a failed project, right? So that's the point. A fifth insight is that architecture has matured over the years into discipline. A body of knowledge exists about how to create a wide range of buildings to meet many types of need. Think about software architecture. We have a whole bunch of existing knowledge as well. It's not only in a paper, it's not only in academic paper, it's also in the company's database. Each company, they also have their own knowledge of the architecture, their own pre-existing knowledge of their previous projects. And also we have software architecture patterns, design patterns. So this pre-existing knowledge help us to have a good design of the architecture, no matter it's a software architecture or it's a building architecture. Yeah. Also, the concept of architecture styles actually it's very powerful. It's a very powerful analogy into the domain of software architecture as well. So one way an architecture style can be summed up is as a set of constraints. So those constraints put upon development in order to elicit particular desirable qualities. For example, the Swiss chalet style has a constraint that the roofs of that kind of building has steep slopes. The quality elicited is that the chalets tend to do well in areas of heavy snowfall. So this kind of style will ensure some sort of quality. So that's the software style. The software sometimes is soft architecture also have a style so that it can fit into certain application domain, like a banking system, or is it banking system? It has some certain style. If it is a database system for student, for a school, for the student management system, it has some certain styles. So yeah, so this kind of, I hope this kind of analogy help you to understand some important features of soft architecture and why do we need this architecture. So it's all about the design. So the design and the building design and the software design, they are similar activities and they have a similar process and ensure the good quality. So okay, I hope you can get some of the idea of what the soft architecture is from the building architecture. All right, thank you.